Year. Higher be hairless minks of the blue sea. It's me. We back at it again. Y'all know what time it is, man. Right? Actually, you might not. But it's time for One Piece, man. Tripping through time. Ooh, spooky as the ambulance goes by. Shout out the legend back, man. I know you ain't posted in a minute, but every time I think of the word spooky, he's who I think of, man. Another goat out there, man. The young G legend Mac. But yesterday, I talked about Zoro a little bit, and obviously there'll be a little bit of discussion about Zoro in this video too, because of where we were in the story at that time point. We had just ran into Mihawk, right? He just got low diffed, and Mihawk said what he said to him. I'm not gonna recap too much on that, especially because most of you know the story already anyway. But most of the things that I wanted to say I kind of said last week, so I don't want to just give you, regurgitate the same information. Just bring up a few points, right, as far as where we left off at. And that was something that Zoro said to Luffy, right? He swore on the Wado to never lose again, right? And this was something I talked about yesterday in the Zoro video, just a random idea I had, because when I reread the story, context is everything. And when you're thinking about where the story is now, there's certain statements where they kind of look different. And it's not something I ever really thought about. But at the end of the series, right, when Zoro becomes the greatest swordsman in the world, we don't know how much time in the story is left after the Straw Hats achieve their goals. I don't think the story is just going to end right there, right? So we might get something about like what their life is going to be like afterwards. And one of the things I thought about just yesterday, well, not just yesterday, a couple of days ago, was what if Momo ends up fighting Zoro at the end of the series, like a cutaway situation, and he wants to challenge Zoro for the title. I just thought that the other day, and I was just like, man, that would be dope. And it never crossed my mind that could be the case. But now with him being aged and whatnot, depending on how that goes, it could be a thing. But anyway, let's get into around chapter 50-ish. I'll talk a little bit about Arlong Park, but I don't want to overcrowd this video, this discussion with information, right? Because a lot happens at the Baratier as far as setup is concerned and the introduction of, well, the backstory of Sanji, right? Which comes into play in Whole Cake Island, of course, about why him and Zephyr is so close. And something in the series that doesn't happen much, but it does happen to people, is their dreams get crushed, right? The Grand Line is not a place for chumps, and we're not even getting to the New York world yet. We're just in paradise, so to speak, as they say. So after being low diff by Mihawk, right, we see Johnny and Yusaku basically in Usopp. Usopp decides, hey, Luffy, you take care of the situation with Sanji, bring us our cook, right? And I'll go after Nami. We're going to get our ship back. Especially for him personally, we know how much he cared about the Mary, like enough to fight Luffy for it later on. You know what I mean? Even though they would have died, that ship was a wrap. And it also introduced during that time the idea of spiritual beings being in the series, right, with the Clobotoman for the Going Merry and whatnot. But that's neither here nor there. That was the plan, right? So they go. That part of the plot starts to take off on its own. And then now we're back at the Bratier, focused on the goat with the coat, as Recon calls him, and our man Sanji, who wants to protect the Bratier from Don Krieg. Now, we don't know exactly why yet. Obviously we know why, but that hadn't started yet, the backstory on Zeph. And then we see what ends up happening is initially, right, the fight kind of begins, in a sense, the overall battle for the Baratier and what Don Krieg was trying to do. And he wanted to take Zeph's logbook and go find the One Piece, which Luffy wasn't trying to hear that. And even some of the comedy in these chapters is still funny to me. Like how much trash Luffy talks is absolutely hilarious for a character who doesn't cuss, or, he doesn't like just try to straight up put people down for no reason. But there's a lot of times in the Baratier section of this story where I'm just cracking up laughing. Like I told you guys last week, him wearing the dish apron. That kind of like made me want to do this series in the first place. As far as the recording my thoughts about like while I'm rereading it, because that to me was a pivotal point. Like even when the first time I read this series, that was around the time where I started like, oh, taking it serious, and I'm like, hey, I might like One Piece. I had seen stuff about it before, but I never really got into it, and that was around the time where it really hit me that I was gonna like this. Was between the setup and just Luffy's character as a whole. He was basically telling Don Krieg and his crew, like, why would I lose to you guys, man? All you guys are trash. Like, you couldn't make it. And, Luffy's real big on that. He even calls the Yonko losers nowadays. You know what I mean? So his whole mentality about, he respects strength, but like if you go talking that King of the Pirates trash, like he's just not having it. And one thing that I also liked was, I was trying to bring up earlier is when Zoro swore on Wado Ichimonji that he would be the world's greatest swordsman because that's what Luffy needs. And even Luffy thought, hey, I need the world's greatest swordsman by my side. So, like, their relationship as far as depending on each other, it's always been that way. Sometimes it gets overlooked just because the interactions are not as big as the focus, right? Because the characters already been introduced. Like they have some character growth, depending on how you look at that. So there's certain things that just don't get focused on much. But when you go back, man, and you just reread, and you're like, man, this was so hype back in the day. And Sanji was a beast. He still is. But he wasn't simp smoking yet. He was a little bit for Nami, but I mean, who in the story besides Luffy for obvious reasons, and to a lesser extent Usopp because he doesn't seem to be swayed by um, the type of tactics, right? That men suffer from. But Zoro straight up after he swears, right? And of course, Luffy goes after Mihawk, which that's not going to be the first time, right? The first time he just wildly goes after him, and then Marineford, we had our little insight about certain things that I won't really discuss necessarily in this video, but Zoro was like he called Luffy King of the Pirates, man. And I didn't even remember. I won't say I didn't know that. I didn't even remember him calling him that. He was the first person and only person in the entire series so far who's already called him that. And I thought that was so dope to see, because he just always, or was always believed. And he's not, he's very critical of Luffy in his decision making at times, and even now, right? Telling him to and Wano like, hey, you got to shape it up. He's been telling him since Zoe, and this is after fighting Katakuri, and Luffy is still doing dumb stuff because that's a part of his character. So what I wanted to talk about most was Sanji, but these things are kind of important too, and they're a part of that portion of the series. So I want to talk about Zoro. I mean, not Zoro, but Sanji, Luffy, and then the Don Krieg fight a little bit. So that's about what area we'll be in. So Don Krieg to me was funny because he didn't care about honor. He doesn't care about all this stuff. He cares about dubs, man. And if any type of whatever game you play, right? Your boy Don Krieg is straight meta to the death of him. He don't care how you get these dubs, man. He could be using whoever, top tier, doesn't matter, right? If it's Call of Duty, there's certain guns that are reasonably better than others. That stuff is proven. There's numbers out there. People test this stuff all the time, right? That applies in everything. Sports, there's a meta. Like whatever it is that you're into that's competitive, there's a meta. And when the One Piece world going after the One Piece is the meta. So for them, certain pirates are real more pirate like compared to the Straw Hats, where they're not about dirty tricks and all that other stuff. Luffy's on straight up, hey, we gonna throw hands, and if you win, you're that guy. But when I win, you gotta chill out. That's basically how Zoro and Luffy get down when it comes to that kind of thing. And we're still in the point of the story where Luffy ain't took no L's yet. So he doesn't know what it feels like to be a loser, right? It just like he took some damage, but he's never really lost before at this time. So Don Krieg's crew is trying to take over his ship, and we get introduced to Pearl. Now, Why Pearl is interesting to me now is because of chapter 1023. And when I was doing my reread, obviously I passed by this and I didn't talk about it last video when it comes to where I was actually at, right? I only went to about Mihawkish. The Pearl thing hit harder this week to me than it did last week because of Sanji's ability to conjure fire in a sense and this whole Lunarian thing. What I want to point out about this is because it was never shown for, you know, like with Dead Man's Hands in Absalom, right? He had bazookas that you couldn't see because of the ability of the clear fruit or the glint fruit, whichever translation you've read before. You know what I'm talking about, the invisible man fruit. And with Pearl though, no trick is ever exposed about why he has the ability to conjure fire. And it was an emotional response. I just wanted to talk about that for a little bit because we know about Sanji, and he even said last chapter, man, my flames burn hot because of my passion, and defying the whatever Germa top five dead or alive Judge Vince Smoke augmentations that may or may have not been activated, right, due to the raid suit and other things, just pure development in a sense to begin with. I thought that was crazy. Seeing now, you're like, wait a minute. Pearl wasn't using some ability. He didn't have a double fruit. He certainly didn't have a Mara. He didn't have anything on him that would have. He wasn't like striking his hands together and creating fire. He wasn't doing anything like that. He's just straight up burst into flames because he's getting upset that he's taking these L's. Because Sanji is wiping the floor with everybody. Sanji was not going, man. He told them, like I was talking about last week, the type of statements that Sanji made was used to be so beastly the way he was talking to them at Baratier, right? And of course, we know why that is because his relationship with Zeph was based on Zeph basically going to take over the ship that Sanji was on, right? And in the beginning of that, Sanji is talking to some cooks, and these cooks are telling him, Sanji's at the time, I believe he's 9 or 10, somewhere in that age, because Sanji and Zoro are the exact same age from what I remember. They're both 19 at this time in the story before the time skip, and they flash back 10 years. So he might have been 9 or 10, whatever. That part's not really that important. What is important, though, is this is when he finds out about the All Blue, which ends up becoming his dream. He already was into cooking, right? He already, because of what we found out later in Whole Cake Island, that he used to cook for his mom, Sora. And, his food was trash, but she still ate it with a smile, even though Sanji knew it wasn't good. But his mom loved him, right? So she did what most parents will do is put up with your kids' failures because one day they'll be successful and you don't want to discourage them from trying. There comes a time where you have to be brutally honest with them, but that's not the age that you have to do that, right? So, and he didn't get that from any other section in his life. So when you reread the Baratier, it was Zeph, it just hit so much harder because you understand that up until that point, right? Sanji, in his mind, to a certain extent, was worthless. And that's something he talks about with Zeph, right? You gave up everything for me, man. You can't be a pirate no more, and things of that nature when we start getting into the Zeph and Sanji backstory, right? So the cooks are telling him, hey, man, the All Blue, it might be real, it might not. You're basically selling him some dreams. But because of being an impressionable child and what he already wanted to do in his life, he took it serious. Like, oh, the All Blue is real, homie. I'm going to make it to the All Blue. They got all the seafood, right? All the different waters combining together. It's just, it's awesome, right? It's a phenomenon of nature, so to speak. So he, of course, why wouldn't be interested in that? If somebody told me that as a kid and there was no internet, I would believe it. If you told me like an area with water that looked like in his lobby, I probably would want to go see that. Not to go to his lobby, but I would want to see something like that with my own eyes. Like just like how Luffy is, right? He wants to experience everything for himself in this journey. He wants to see everything with his own eyes. He doesn't want to be told a story. He loves stories. He'll listen to some storytelling, but he wants to go do. And that's the same thing with Sanji. He wants to go do. He wants to be. But he felt like he owed Zeph. Even though Zeph is, at the time, it's not like Zeph was a nice guy, right? He was there to raid the ship. He just had this thing about people going hungry. He even told his men, don't touch anybody's food. and somebody got watched for touching some of the people's food that they was robbing. So at least Zeph had some decency to him. Like, yeah, I'll come rob your house, but I'm not gonna take the food out of your refrigerator for your kids to eat. He won't go that far. There's some people who will, but not Zeph, right? And we see their ship crash, right? And or no, Sanji went off the boat, and Zeph went in after him, and they ended up washed up on the island. And of course, earlier with the cooks, Sanji kind of frowned down upon them for eating, scraps of food, basically, what people didn't eat. And they told him, hey, look, you never know. There's going to be times where you don't have food. And it makes even more sense now for Sanji because technically he grew up rich. So he doesn't know about being hungry. He knows about other stuff, but being hungry was not something that he necessarily went through. So to him, he's just like, "What do you mean? Why are you eating food that people already ate? This is gross, right?" And just learning the appreciation of being in a situation when you're not gonna have, and you can't create, right? And that's what happened with them. And Sanji went some days without eating, and even Zeph in the beginning, he didn't understand. That's something that an adult would do, right? Um, they don't want you to necessarily feel babied in a sense. But on the same note, they're still going to baby you because that's what Zeph was doing. Sanji was never supposed to live through that ordeal. Zeph probably could have made it on his own. And just like he told Sanji, man, I'll slit your throat and I can eat you if I want to. I'm not going to, but I could. And I think the panel that really hit hard for me during that is when he had his last piece of bread. And y'all know how it is, man, that last of anything that you like to eat, regardless if you have more food or not. Probably worse if you don't have food. But even when you do have food, and that last thing, right? Whether it's the last of the rice or the last of the macaroni and cheese, the last piece of chicken, you know what I mean? It just the little bit of, or when people eat cereal and they leave the crumbs, and you're like, man, why'd you just throw the box away? You guys know what I'm getting at. And he's eating that last piece of moldy bread, and he's thinking back to what the cooks were trying to teach him about, right? As far as appreciation for food, and hey, man, you got to eat scraps sometimes. There's nothing wrong with leftovers, dog. You got to get it how you live. You don't have a choice on eating, you know. And for him to experience that at such a young age, and, Sanji didn't want to die. He even told Zeph like he felt worthless because Zeph gave up his dream for him, in a sense. But Zeph kind of already knew, I think, that going back to the Grand Line and dealing with all of that, he told him, he's like, I don't have my crewmates. It's not the same. You know, I could start a new crew. He could have, and went back at it again. He still had his logbook at the time, right? But he just, in his mind, it's not the same. You guys know how that is sometimes with something. If it's the lost opportunity, even if you could get it back, if it's not with the same people, if you played sports or something, right? Certain friends you grew up with, if you played travel ball or something, you're just like, it's just not the same, or if you transfer, it's just certain things are not the same. So and by Zeph's standpoint, his dream was dead and he had a new dream, right? And that's to build the Baratier so nobody will go hungry. And my AC just kicked on. Give me 1 second. Sorry. I told you that last time. Man, I should have did that out, but it's not going to happen. But his new dream became the Baratier, so no matter where he is on the seas, no one's going to go hungry as long as he's around. And that's what the basis of his characteristic is. And that ended up passing down to Sanji once he realized, like, hey, I can't. He's getting delusional, right? And then he got the false hope, like Castaway. Hey, there's a ship. And, back then, if he could burst into flames, he could have got their attention, right? But he couldn't light the wood because it was wet, and he just didn't have an understanding on how to deal with the situation. So that felt even probably worse, right? You're already hungry, and then now he's getting delusional because that is a thing, right? You start losing nutrients and all that other stuff. At a certain point, you become a walking zombie in a sense. So for him, he couldn't take it no more. He's like, you know what? I'm gonna have to go try to kill Zeph, man. I gotta get something to eat. And that's when he finds out how much of a G Zeph really was, man. Because he could have let Sanji die and went about his business. I'm sure he's seen kids die before. This is the pirate world. All types of, Oda doesn't get into that kind of themes, but we all know bad things happen during the pirate age in real life. So even Zoro's name, right, where the name is based off of one of the worst pirates who ever existed as far as like brutality and stuff like that is concerned, which I talked about that yesterday. So his life could have been extremely different in the means of he would have been dead. So that part to me was just like, man, Zeph, he's not a nice guy, but he wasn't an evil guy. You know what I mean? He was dancing in this gray area there, and I enjoy those type of characters because it's hard for me to necessarily like from a strategy standpoint. I can connect with somebody like a Blackbeard, or a Don Krieg or an Orhochi in a way, just from a tactical standpoint. But the humanity in me and the competitiveness that I want to go against the best, similar to how Luffy is in the story in Zoro, where I just couldn't go about it that route. It would just wouldn't feel like a real dub, right? It's cheating. And after that whole ordeal, man, even a decade later, Sanji basically was trying to give his life to Zeph in a sense for what he gave up because Sanji can't replace what he thought Zeph's dream was, right? And from the perspective of a child, I would understand him feeling like that. You know, like you can't get back time. And it's not like Zeph was super young when they met in the first place. So to him, he probably just felt like a burden. And when he was bringing up the worth, him feeling worthless, that really stems back to how he was treated, before he met Zeph, right? Which we learned in Whole Cake Island, being the man in the iron mask and, the situation with top five dead or alive Judge Vinsmoke and Ichiji and Niji just beating him up all the time and all that other silly stuff. And, his life sucked, you know. So for that to turn around, he's a man now, he has his own life, but he still has his honor and he still remembers everything that he went through. So he was ready to take these beatings from Pearl once again pulled out the shotty on Zeph because they knew they was getting ready to get washed, right? And Don Krieg is just sitting there chilling like, hey man, you guys do what you do. If I got to get up out this chair, no one's going to be happy. So y'all need to take care of it, right? And Pearl kept just getting destroyed because he's just not. And it's interesting now thinking back with augmentations and stuff. It's very possible that I just assume it's always based on Sanji's strength. I don't try to give the Straw Hats extra power ups out of nowhere. But thinking back, like how much damage he was able to take even back then is Sanji was tanking some stuff, man. Like to ride for Zeph to the point where Luffy is like, I can't do this no more, G. I'm not trying to fight your battles for you, homie, but I cannot sit here and watch this. And and that's when Don Krieg and even Gann are trying to basically, it's really Oda, right, trying to tell Luffy that everything you think about pirates, you really don't know yet, right? Because he knew Shanks and people like that, that character build. He doesn't know about treachery. Like, yeah, okay, Alvida and Axam Morgan, but they weren't really as treacherous as what was going on at the Baratier, right? What was going on there was something totally different that would have changed the story forever. And what he learned about Sanji, right? Luffy has mad respect for Sanji and Zoro and Usopp, at this time. Not as much Nami. We get into that with Arlong Park, but Luffy had that respect for Sanji and Zoro right off the bat. He even told Zoro and Usopp, like, hey, look, you see, he's strong. That's our cook right there. He's coming with us, man. I'm signing that free agent, Supermax. You know what I mean? Let's come on. We don't care about luxury tax over here. we will pay you what you want. And Luffy is very hard at it. So him sitting there for that long compared to the Luffy we know now, he had extreme patience, and even understanding like that these characters are strong, but he also understood that enough to know to bend rules, which is not something we see Luffy do, no pun intended. But like when he broke the fin on the Baratie, he's just like, I'll just sink the ship, homie. I can't sit here and watch you take this man's dreams. Plus, I want this cook. So part of it was slightly selfish, but Luffy's always about everybody else because he doesn't care about money. He doesn't care about. He just wants adventure and food. That's all it means specifically. Pause. You already know. Luffy is always at the cookout, every barbecue, every grill house, every steakhouse. He's everywhere. That's just what he's on. So understanding that, and finally he snapped. Right. Um. Honestly, if hockey was a thing, that situation almost called for people to get Conqueror's clap immediately. Like it could have popped out right at that time just because what he was watching. And this is the first time we've seen Luffy have to watch somebody suffer. The situation with Mihawk wasn't suffering. That was ambition and learning to be defeated, right? Because at this time we hadn't seen Luffy lose before, but he's seen Zoro lose before, right? He doesn't see him lose again, but he's seen him lose that day, and understanding how much stronger. Because Luffy would have died too if he would. If Mihawk would have took them serious, right? Even Mihawk had respect for them, like you know, hey, your crewmate, he's riding, man, and you, what do you want to do? Oh, King of the Pirates, interesting. I'll holler at y'all somewhere down the line. You know what I mean? So if a stronger character like that had respect for them, then of course like Luffy's gonna take that serious, and he always puts out what he thinks about other characters as far as their strength and their abilities and how they go about their business. He'll straight up tell you, "You're trash." Like he was telling Don Creek's crew, like, "You guys are all trash. I would never lose to any of you people." That's how I know that the Prate is gonna be fine because I'm here, man. He didn't have a coat yet, and he wasn't a young goat yet, but that's where that was leading, and I just rock with that heavy. And I also like Don Creek though. I like those schemers, man. I like them because it can't be everybody. It's like real life, right? There's some real scumbags out there, and there's some really good people who, even if they don't know you, they'll give you their last bread, as long as they ain't got they feed their kids with it. You know what I mean? Those people are out there. They might feel like they're few and far between, but I'm sure everybody knows good people that they weren't even close to that showed them something, and that's something that Luffy always sticks to. You know, his loyalty to good nature, I guess you could put it that way, because he's not really Luffy's malicious when it comes to actually beating people up. Because when he does want to fight, that's what he wants to do, and he really wants to hurt you and to make sure that you're not going to be the Pirate King. Like he'll put you out of commission. That's what he's on. Outside of that, though, it's all positivity coming from him. So we get the fight, like I was saying earlier, with Pearl, and then what happened with Gin and whatnot. And what I thought was like, I don't know how to put this. I don't want to say it's not something that I didn't like, but the fact that, or no, what I liked was Don Creed was lying to Luffy, right? He's so upfront. He's like, "Oh, I'm gonna shoot you with this gas bomb," and then get hit with some sharp objects. Like that kind of stuff I like because that's tactics. That's not necessarily treachery. There's no such thing as a fair fight in the pirate world. Even in Wano, they find it out like we're never gonna catch the fair one. This entire series, we're probably never gonna catch the fair one because the world ain't fair, right? If the world was fair, the world government wouldn't be in charge, and 99% of the characters in the series face oppression of some sort. So the reality of what the world is has no influence on how Luffy views himself and how he carries himself. So this going back and forth with Don Krieg, and basically Don Krieg without his weapons is not really a threat. You know what I mean? He really wasn't. But he was smart and he was a tactician, and Luffy could have died. You know, if Don Krieg and Luffy were equal strength, Luffy probably would have lost. Even with unless he unlocked something, he probably would have got washed. So I the Barate isn't my favorite part of the story, but I appreciate it a lot more now. That I did even last year or the year before. The last time I've read these things. But it's like when you're so far down the line with character development and seeing where their story actually ends up going, this stuff hits hard, right? Nostalgia and all, I enjoyed it. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today was, the situation with Zeph and why that became important to Sanji and everything Sanji gave up. I won't say everything he gave up. I'll say everything he gained by giving up the Baratie, right, and joining the Straw Hats, because even Zeph is like, hey man, get out of here, eggplant. You know what I mean? We don't need you here. You go do your thing. Because and the funny part to me is basically Luffy traded chores to beat up Don Krieg and gain Sanji. He was like, hey man, I'm not good at this washing dishes and I'm breaking plates and stuff and taking out trash sucks. Like Kobe's life must have sucked. Like I don't know how Kobe did this. That's basically what Luffy was on. But yeah man, that was just that Sanji greatness, man. Like that hits hard in the whole cake, boy. And I think that's part of the reason, like, that's the stuff that Luffy, even though they don't talk about it, that's the kind of thing Luffy was thinking about when he went to go to Whole Cake Island to get Sanji. Is basically this situation, how they met and his respect for him. And, like, even though it doesn't happen yet, it happens at Arlong Park, but Sanji and Nami basically were doing the same thing. They went off and tried to take care of their own business by themselves because they felt like they didn't have anybody else. Even though Sanji knew he had the Straw Hats, you seen what could have happened. If we were being realistic, especially what we know about Big Mamu now, the Straw Hats should have never made it out of Whole Cake Island. But even with that being said, Luffy, I think even if he thought that he couldn't win, which is not something Luffy has ever thought, with the exception of after Ace died, where his resolve was the lowest, thanks to Jinbei being there, things stayed somewhat realistic and positive. He would have found out the hard way he can't beat everybody because he can't beat Big Mom now, even with this. That's just my personal opinion. That's the captain. That's still the future Pirate King, to go with the coat, as Recon calls him. And I love it. But Big Mama ain't going, man. Y'all know how I feel about Big Mama. The 1v1 with Luffy, he could probably get in there for a few. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, man, if Kaido probably can't easily Big Mom, there's just no way at this point of the story. Even with Conqueror's coding, right? But that's another story for another day. Just thinking about Zeph always brings back Big Mom now. But yeah, man, that's kind of all I want to talk about. That and what Sanji said about a knife being a chef's soul. So that was like a time in the story where, even though we hadn't got very far, as far as like I don't know what the word is. I'm looking for a word, but I can't think of it. That sucks right now. And it made me lose my train of thought. I spent so much time trying to figure out what word I was thinking about. But anyway, y'all, I appreciate y'all kicking with me for a little bit. We gonna get back on this probably tomorrow if I can, before the chapter drops. If not, we'll be back on this Monday where we continue from the Baratier on through Arlong Park, man, because Nami's backstory, man, is coming. And y'all know what that means. Y'all enjoy y'all day. Appreciate you stopping by. I'll catch you for chapter 1024, probably Friday. One